Hi, this is Carson with Troy. I have with me author and game designer Alan Morgan. Now, Alan's first book, The Children of Arla, was released earlier this year, and it coincides with the game that he's designing, Planet Postmoderna. Alan, thank you so much for getting on with me, and go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the story you're creating.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, I'm Alan Morgan. I'm actually an indie game designer and author. The story actually, ironically, started back in the early 1980s, is when I first started it. It was a kind of an apocalyptic story about the second coming of Quetzalcoatl. Because if you understand, history, Quetzalcoatl supposedly um, promised to come back to the Aztecs and the Mayans, and he never did. So I had this idea for a story back then that was kind of like based on that and the end of the world, but it it evolved into something totally different. And and now it's Children of Arla, which is the beginning part of that entire story, which is the inspiration behind the virtual world game that I started in 2008.
Now, you said this started back in the 80s, and I read on your biography on your website that it started out as a comic.
Yep. It was
So,
actually, it was a story, but I drew it out in the form of a comic so that I could kind of visualize it a little bit more. And I was experimenting with my artistic skills, which really weren't really good. And, but it helped me kind of get it out and get an idea of what I wanted it to look like.
well, and that's interesting because it's taken different forms, different media. Art with a comic, and now it's a. I mean, it was a story beforehand, and then you created a comic so you could visualize it, and then you started. You expanded that story to novelization to coincide with the VR, the video game that
Yeah.
you're trying to do.
Yeah.
What was the? So you said it was a second coming of Quetzalcoatl. What was the genesis of that? Like, why did you choose that to write about?
I don't know. You're going to think I'm crazy, but I had a dream that I was being chased by some dark entity. And this was like when I was in my early 20s. And I was dreaming that I was being chased by some dark entity, and I turned into a dragon to get away from it. And it was so realistic to me that I woke up, and I'm sure people have had dreams like this where it's so realistic to you that you actually hurt when you wake up. Well, that's exactly how I felt. And it had such an impact on me that I decided to pursue that and turn it into a story. But my original intent back then was really just to write a story that people could experience. And this was before video games took off. And I mean, I was writing text game, or what do they call that? I can't even remember it right now, but it was a text-based game on my Commodore 128.
Nice.
And I was writing that, and I kind of stopped it because life happened. But that was my intent, was to make something that somebody could experience, not just read. And it was funny because it was far before any video games really kind of evolved into what they are today. But timing is everything. And now it seems like I can do a lot of what I visioned back then that, anyway, but that's kind of what I was thinking.
No, it's interesting how things evolve. Like I had an idea for not only this podcast, but what I want to do with Troy back in 2008, 2009, and the technology just wasn't there yet for what I want to do, and now it is. And so
Yeah.
I started pursuing this. Another thing that's interesting is ideas can come from anywhere. A dream, a writing prompt, whatever. In your case, it was a dream, and you got up and decided to pursue this. And it's been kind of a process since the 80s for it to come out. What has been some of the struggles, and what has been some of the triumphs of your journey?
Oh my God. Where do you want me to start? in I think I think a lot didn't happen between the early 80s and I'd say 2004. I mean, I enjoyed playing games, but I just kind of shelved my idea. I had gone to several writers groups and tried to pick up writing the story again. So it went through a few iterations in the 1990s. And again, I stopped it. But in 2004, 2000, somewhere between 2004 and 2006, I remember reading And I might have my dates wrong. I'd have to go back and refer to some of the blog articles I have on my website, because that's how I can kind of remember things. In fact, I've gotten to the point that now I think the internet's my brain. That's how I remember stuff. But I saw an article in the Wall Street Journal about these high school kids that were making $8,000 a month playing video games and making, armor and clothes in Second Life or Entropy Universe. So I started looking into that a little bit more. I thought it was really, really fascinating. And I got a couple of accounts set up on Second Life and Entropy Universe, and both of them were kind of in their infant stages. Second Life's graphics are really, really hokey, I thought, compared to what I was used to playing in video games. And then I went on to, oops, hold on a second. Sorry about that. My phone, I forgot to turn my phone off. Sorry about that.
No problem.
But anyway.
Nice ringtone, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. That's my default ringtone. Again, dragons, right? But I started looking into Entropia Universe, and Entropia Universe I was extremely fascinated about because it was a sci-fi based game. The graphics still were, a little bit not too bad, and it was a real cash economy, which I found very, very fascinating, where players could actually buy stuff and exchange them for value. So basically, you could take all your assets and sell them and get money back. So I mean, obviously not full value, but I kind of weighed that out against what it would cost you to do a subscription game like Star Wars Galaxies or WoW, and really it still ended up being less money because of the fact that you could make money. So, it might cost you 25 cents an hour to basically play your game by comparing the amount of money you put in versus what you can actually get out of it. So to me, I thought, hey, that makes sense, right? And then they came out with a Partner Planet program where people could independently invest in a game concept and use their platform to build it. So you would actually be building your game inside of their game using their functionality, which I thought was a really neat idea. So I spent a long time trying to take my game idea and my story idea and using Entropia Universe as a way to make it happen. I went a long ways of trying to generate funding and pitch it at startup groups and investor forums and all kinds of stuff, just trying to raise the money. But it was very hard. The price tag back then was $2 million to buy a planet, and I could barely get anybody to contribute anything more than a few $100s, because the idea of a virtual world and real cash economy was almost people just couldn't understand it. And I was not able to generate the revenue that I wanted to do. So I started putting together a team thinking, hey, maybe let's go ahead and just build our own demo and show people what we can do and maybe get investors that way. And I started recruiting people from different artist boards from all over the world, everywhere from, Australia to Denver to Serbia and the UK. And I got a pretty good team together. In fact, I even recruited the head of Mesoamerican history at the University of Colorado to basically provide, input. And I still could not get the money to raise, that I needed to basically start the project, to the point that I finally gave up once the price tag was raised from $2 million to $6 million by Mindarc, mostly because a lot of the people that they did bring on as partner planets were cannibalizing the existing player base. So that's kind of why the cost went up. At that point, I decided, I'm just going to try to build my own project, and I continue to work with a lot of my volunteers. And they contribute a lot of assets. I mean, I even started a little program at the Art Institute to try to use students at the Art Institute to contribute assets and help out on the project. I even went back to school thinking that might actually help me be taken more seriously by investors, and it just didn't work out. It's kind of like one of those things where the stars are just not aligned in the right place to make things happen. And I finally gave up. And ended up moving to El Paso from Colorado Springs and for my work. And in 2014, I think it was around there that I picked up the story again and tried to get it edited when I came down to El Paso. After a while, it didn't quite pan out. And in fact, the editor that I used actually gave me more work than I originally started
man.
out with. So I finally said, oh, what am I doing? So I just totally scratched it. And then for some reason, last year, in the fall of last year, something just came over me and I said, I have got to finish this, because if I at least finish the story and get the story out there so that people could experience it and understand the background, maybe I could start getting people interested. That's what I decided to do. So in December, I hired an editor, and she helped me finish polishing off whatever I need to get done, got it published in January. And that's when I started to decide, when I basically decided to go to the Comic Cons and start pitching the story. And since then, I've been bitten by the bug of wanting to finish the game as well. So like when I talked to you at Phoenix Fan Fusion, it was about the time when I pretty much had done some of the basic core development on the game again as an indie, not as part of some big thing with Entropia Universe anymore. It's really just building back to what I originally thought in the early 1980s, which was to create a story that people could experience. And that's kind of where I'm back at right now. So I'm using things like Game Creator and Gaia for procedural terrain. And I'm building out the inventory system and the functionality using visual scripting instead of coding, because I hate programming. I mean, I even tried to teach myself programming for a little while by taking a lot of the courses that they had online with Unity. Tried to get my certification in Colorado and failed miserably at that, because I realized I don't know squat about coding. Even though I tried to get my mind around it, I could not sit down and absolutely do anything more than create Hello World. So I finally gave up on that and discovered visual scripting with Game Creator, which has actually been very easy for me to do. And that's kind of what I'm doing right now. So that, in a nutshell, was my long version of point A to point B on everything that I've gone through with regards to this project. And exactly like you said earlier, it's that whole idea of just not giving up. And even though I'm probably crazy, but I really want to see this happen. So I'm going to figure out a way to make it happen, even if I have to do it myself.
So I like the fact that you wrote a book as well to coincide, to kind of, lots of people, authors, put out like a reader magnets to, a little short story to help whet the appetite, as it were, to read your story. And that's what your book basically is like, try to immerse people in this world so that it can help you with your game design. How much, I mean, I went on your website and you have a YouTube video of, what's been done so far. How much backstory have you done? How much world building have you done? It looks like you've done quite a bit.
Yeah, I actually have it's a 80 some page game design document that I created back in 2011. So I have a lot of the foundational stuff done, but as far as the actual game is concerned, I've gotten the base camp area, which is where a lot of the initial team that discovered the planet ended up at. That's already mapped out. I'm just trying to build the functionality right now that goes on top of the actual scenery. I have, my movements set up. I mean, I can do everything from, run and walk to jump to engage in combat with a hunting knife, which essentially is really what people are going to be limited to, because energy weapons don't work on Argus, which is the planet they discovered, because the crystal that is so apparent on this planet absorbs energy. So if you go too far from base camp, your weapons and your communication and all that stuff isn't going to work. Thankfully, the V chip that everybody is equipped with, that's in their brain, that is powered by your own energy. So it uses the energy in your body. And thankfully, the luminoid crystals don't take energy out of people or organic material. It basically takes it only out of our electronic devices. So, people are limited to using hand melee weapons and just traditional what do you call projectile weapons, like bows and arrows and guns and things that the old west was built. So it's really the old west in space kind of.
Well, I like that handicap. I think that in every story, I think the limitations of a character are more important and more interesting than what they can do, because then they have to think creatively. They have to
Yeah.
explore and be able to do something in a different way than what's expected.
Yeah, and like I shared with you at Fan Fusion, this whole project is based on the premise that the story is the basis of the project, but you cannot, you have to play the game after you read the story, because there's pieces in the story that you will miss in the game if you don't read the book first. And there are puzzles that you have to solve in certain parts of the game that you will not be able to satisfactorily complete without having the background that you got from the story. So it's like they're meant to be done together. And on a big scale, I'm hoping that this whole process of having to read a book and play a game together will get people to read more and play less games only by themselves, just to grind through and get all your experience points, that they can actually do what I originally wanted to do, which was create a story that people could experience, because they have to be done together. It's like you can't go play the game without reading the book. It ain't gonna work.
That's awesome. That's a fantastic concept. Really and truly activates certain different aspects of the brain too.
Mhm.
So it helps develop a person even more. And being able to have them linked, it really immerses people in a world different than any other game concept out there. So you said you went back to school. Were you self-taught kind of with the game development side of it, or how were you able to kind of do that?
Most of it, yes. When I was actually trying to launch the project with Entropia Universe, one of the guys on our team, he said, he's the one who told me, hey, Alan, you really need to work on a game design document, so that'll help you, stay organized. And it hadn't it been for his suggestion, I probably would have never done it, because I was flying by the seat of my pants. I was good at organizing and trying to manage a project as best as I can. I just didn't have the technical expertise to do a lot of that stuff. So I learned Maya and 3ds Max and Blender and all those things on my own, but it wasn't enough. So I enrolled at the Art Institute thinking, hey, I'm going to take their game design course and hopefully that will help me. Well, it did, but I ended up quitting. I hate to say that, but it was mostly because I lived in Colorado Springs. The school was in Denver. They only did so much online, and had I decided to transfer to the full online course at Pittsburgh, I would have had to start all over, and I just didn't want to do that. So I said, I'm just going to stop doing this, and it was a big disappointment for me, because I really enjoyed what I did. And I liked going to school. The other classmates loved me, mostly because I was an older guy that knew a little bit about game design, and it was just kind of neat. It was just a good culture and a good atmosphere. It's just I couldn't finish. So everything that I've done has pretty much been self-taught, because I had to. It's not like I wanted to. I mean, I was fascinated by the subject, so it was fun, but I did kind of have to learn a lot on my own. And I owe a lot to that one guy that was on my team that started me writing that game design document, because it did help me focus and it did help me stay organized. And now I've got this big document that I could use if somebody wanted to buy the project. and say, hey, this is what we're able to do for the base camp area, and this is what we have to make, what has to be created. And, but that's kind of where I am right now. Sorry, that was a long way to answer your question. I apologize.
No. There's some fabulous nuggets that people can take. One of the greatest nugget that, reading your life bio on your website and stuff is the fact that, you talked about the regret of giving up the Art Institute class and whatnot. But one of the greatest marks of success is picking things back up. And that's what you've been able to do. Things,
Yeah.
Life has happened to you to where you've had to stop for whatever reason. But last year you got a bug and you stuck with it and you were able to get the novel out so people can see like this is real, this is happening. What were some of your habits to get it out so fast?
Just deciding to do it. I mean, I had already finished the manuscript. I just needed somebody to help me finish the rest. So getting that editor to help me tweak it and polish out the parts that need to be polished was really all it took. I just had to basically decide to go and hire somebody. I knew it was going to cost me money. I didn't want to spend it, but I knew I just needed to do it. It was either get that done or still delay it some more. And I just didn't want to do that. I just said, I've been sitting on this for decades, and is that really what I wanted to do? Is just to say, hey, I've got this great idea and do nothing about it. So I decided to hire somebody, and she helped with the editing and the cover. And
Oh, really? Got 2 for 1, huh?
yeah, I mean, she was awesome. She really was.
And how long ago had you finished the manuscript?
I finished it in 2014.
So it's been sitting on the shelf for 6-7 years.
Yeah, sadly.
Well, I mean, there are lots of people out there who I think have written novels who have, put them aside because they think they're, no good, or like you, like don't want to spend the money to actually get it professionally edited. They think they can do it themselves, or life just gets in the way, and that can stop somebody too. But you have shown, take whatever you have, dust it off, and finish it and get it out there so people can read it and enjoy it and see what happens.
Yep.
So this is the first of, are you going to do multiple stories?
Yeah. In fact, I already have an idea for the second part of the story, but I have to put that on hold until I can get this part of the game done. So chapter 1 of the game is meant to be done after Children of Arla. And once chapter 1 is done, or at least the core part of it is done, I'm hoping to go pitch it at the Game Design Conference and see if I'm lucky enough to get a investor to actually finish the game, because that would be awesome. But even if I cannot, I'm not going to stop. I'll get, chapter 1 done. And then when chapter 1 is done and published, then I'll go work on the next book, which is going to be kind of centered on the technology itself and the generation of children that basically grew up with that technology and their influence on using it. Essentially, they're going to use virtual worlds as a way to create, and they're going to create in the virtual world and discover that there is, without me giving away too much, discover that there's another level of space travel that exists in the virtual sense. And that virtual plane is actually a real plane that connects points in our real time space. So, that's a Hydrakian technology that we accidentally discover through these kids that grew up with the VCHEP technology that John Baxter created.
Oh, that's fantastic. That sounds awesome.
So that can't happen until the game's done.
Those of you, for those who want to, be a game designer and is creating their own thing, will you explain what the Game Design Con is, that people can go in there kind of knowing what to expect?
GDC, the Game Design Conference, is a big conference that developers and publishers and, I guess, aspiring indie game designers go to network and take classes. It's usually held in San Francisco. And I remember wanting to go when I was at the Art Institute, and I just couldn't think of a way to afford it, because it's usually about $2,600 just for the conference if you want to participate in everything. And then you got travel and all that kind of stuff. But it is a good event to be at, because you've got, organizations like Unity, and some of the big publishers like, EA, and they're there. So it's like, if you want to network with the right people and see new games that are planning to come out, it's a good conference to go to. Probably followed second by E3, which is the big one that most of the big publishers go to, that talk about new technologies like the next PlayStation or whatever. But the game design conference is a good conference to go to if you're a developer and you're aspiring to launch your game or learn from other people in the industry, because they have great classes, about game development and concepting and all that kind of stuff. And it's just something that I wish I had done a long time ago. But right now, as I mentioned, timing is everything. So now it just feels like everything is in the right place today to make me do things that I could not have done 20, 30 years ago.
So if somebody wants to become a game designer, have the story and whatnot, what are some of the tips and tricks that you could give them to kind of help them out?
Network. I mean, it really is about networking, and don't be too proud to reach out for help. Because a lot of people, they get in their little clique. They're like, I'm gonna, network with some of my fellow students at school or whatever, but they never really get anywhere because they're not putting themselves out there. You've got to get out there, and even if it means you need to move to some place like Austin or San Francisco, where there are more studios. Sometimes it's good to just be in the place in the industry that you want to be in. And nowadays with podcasts and Zoom and everything out there, as far as being able to break down those barriers that we have with geography, it's like, why would you not take advantage of it? Get out there and meet people, even if it's in the virtual sense, just so that you can start building a team of people that you can learn from. And because obviously there's no monopoly in knowledge, right? So no matter how much someone's going to learn from you just as much as you learn from them. So just get out there. That would be my advice. Don't be afraid. Don't sit on it for 30 years.
That's great advice. I've been surprised at how many people, I've interviewed authors and artists, and how many people would say, get out and network. It's important. And, I'm an introvert. This isn't my comfort level of whatever, but in order to grow and be able to achieve what I want to achieve, I have to put myself out there and be able to expand, my circle of influence. So that's great advice. What kind of challenges have you came across now that the book is out that that you've come across
I
as
think
far
most
as
of it,
marketing and different things?
yeah, I mean, I have a pretty lengthy background in sales and marketing. So a lot of the stuff that I'm doing now, I've done or been exposed to. For me, it's always been a funding issue. That's been my biggest challenge throughout this entire process from when I first started, is, you get into the mode of trying to get by, on a regular basis, because life, as I mentioned, I hate to say life happens, but it does. You get married or you have kids, and that's going to demand time. And unless you're actually working the job in that career field that you want to be in, a lot of times you have to put that on hold, because whatever you're doing at that time to pay the bills, that becomes the priority, especially if you have a family, right? But you have to never ever keep your eye off that goal. Don't ever forget it, because letting life take its priority and putting that aside is probably the worst thing you could ever do. I mean, even if you've got to persuade your spouse or your family to say, please, I just need your support. And this is really, really what I want to do. Do that. Don't ever say, oh, I'll just forget about it. You know what I mean? But for me, that whole process, had I maybe did a little bit more networking, and try to find investors and things like that, and been a little bit more pushy, I guess, maybe things would have turned out differently. But I am a firm believer, and my wife reminds me of this all the time. It's like sometimes it's God's plan, not yours. And you just got to remember that it's just, maybe it just wasn't the right time. And I really believe that, because when I talk to people now about the project, people still think it's a novel and cool idea to merge mediums and bridge the gap between reading and playing a game and having an immersive experience that's based on both. Yet it's really not a new idea. It's been tried in the past. It's just, I don't know if anyone's pulled it off successfully. And I think that's one of the things that drives me the most, is I want to make that happen. So who knows? But if I could get the funding, I think that would probably speed things up. Because, I am investing a lot on my own in time and money, but, having that extra funding would definitely help me push forward. So I am thinking about, working on maybe another Kickstarter program. I did that back in 2011. It wasn't successful, but I was probably asking for too much. Focus small, focus on, hey, what do I need to maybe start building some assets for Basecamp, instead of thinking about the whole project, instead of going after that full $200,000 to $2 million, just focus on maybe 5 to 10,000, get that raised first, and then build those assets, show people what you can do, then go back and ask for more or get more investors, because you're going to build traction. It's kind of like you're doing your podcast, right? In the very beginning, when you did your first podcast, you didn't really expect 100,000 or 200,000 people to be watching you, right? It happens over time. Same thing. But you have to be committed and you have to stick at it. And my issue is always distraction. I get very easily distracted, and I need to stop that.
Well, you mentioned a few things that I really like. One, have a goal and have it up there so you can see, have a projection of what you want.
Put a picture on your refrigerator or something. I don't know what.
Yeah, something, have a goal and be able to focus on that. Two, talk to somebody, a significant other or whatever, and to have them support you. You mentioned your Kickstarter. Go in little bits instead of, the massive thing. And we talked about networking before, but networking is huge. Like if you're going for a Kickstarter or, your first time author or whatever, reach out and maybe those people that have been successful can help you out. So
Yeah.
these are all great nuggets that somebody that's listening can pull from and be able to advance their career that you shared. Are you able to work on your game every single day, or what are some of your habits to kind of progress?
Yeah, I have a tendency to be all or nothing, which is a bad thing. So I have made I've come to an agreement with my wife, no more than an hour and a half. So I'll do it an hour and a half every day, and I'll set my little timer so that I can have that time to work on whatever I need to work on. And if I'm not done and that timer goes off, stop. Because the truth is, you really have to have balance. And it's really easy to get obsessed about your vision and forget about all the other things around you, such as your family or work or whatever. And you just gotta have that balance, right? So, or you'll never finish, because you'll be so obsessed that either the fun of it goes out the window, or you're going to stop because you're treading water because you can't keep up because of everything else that's going on. So if you could just have that balance and proceed from that point. And I have found that has really, really helped me a lot, because now I get to spend time working on it, except I'm not robbing, my wife of time that I should be spending with her, or getting out there to mow my grass, or, getting emails answered for work, all that kind of stuff, so that is
I like it. That's a great advice for anybody that's doing it. And it doesn't have to be an hour and a half. If you can only just put in a half hour, I think consistency is more important than doing everything all in a big chunk and burning yourself out, I think.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that in some of the panels, like when I was up in Denver, when we were talking about writing, people ask, well, how do you finish a book? Well, one page at a time. Even if you could only write one page at a time, do that. And one of the big things that I got out of one of the panels I was on was a great nugget of advice, and that was, don't edit your story as you go. Finish your story, then go back and edit it. So commit to doing 1 or 2 pages a day, but focus on finishing that story. Don't stop and edit and then write some more and then edit and then write some more, because that's what I did. And look how long it took me to finish my story. So because I was a perfectionist, right? And
Right.
cannot do that. You got to finish your story, get the words out into the universe first, and then go back. But do it one bit at a time.
That's fantastic advice. I don't remember who said it, but one of the things that hit me is, you're not a good author. Those people that are, selling millions of copies of books and whatnot aren't good authors. They're good revisers.
Yep.
But first they had to have something to revise. So finish your story. And I thought that was great advice. Is there anything else you want to share before we end here?
I know I'm looking at building a team again. I would love to be able to get a team of volunteers together to help make this project a reality. And I'm definitely looking for investors all the time to help provide funding. But if anything, on a personal level, I would have to say, anybody out there that's looking to make a dream happen, don't just look to make it happen. Go out there and take those steps to make it happen. And don't ever take your eyes off that goal. I mean, just do it. Don't, may not be able to get it done today, but if you stick at it, you will finish it. And I know I'm not going to give up until this project is done. I mean, I could be 70 or 80 years old someday and barely being able to carry on a conversation with anybody, but I want to see it happen. I want to be able to look back and say, hey, I stuck it out and I made it happen. It hurt like hell, but I made it happen. That's what I want to say.
Perfect. So if anybody's listening, how can they get a hold of you if they want to join their team, if they want to invest? What can people do?
They can actually contact me through the website. So they can go to planet-postmoderna.com. I'm sure you'll post it up there as a link or something, but yeah, if they go there, they can go to the project information page, and there's even a contact page on there that you can actually reach out to me and let me know what your interest is, or even if you just want to join the mailing list, a lot of those resources are right on the website.
Perfect. Are you going to go to any more conventions this year?
Not this year. I think I'm done. I made a promise to my wife, no more this year. The next big one would be the game design conference, and I'm hoping that the demo will be done by then. If not, I am for sure going to probably repeat what I did this year. I'll go to the El Paso Comic-Con first, and then back to Fan Fusion in Phoenix. And I already re-registered for the Denver one for next year. So I'll definitely be up there, but it takes a lot, all that travel and, talking to people. It's as fun as it is. It takes a lot of energy, and I kind of like, same thing what you talked about, it's like, I kind of like myself as kind of a hybrid between an introvert and an extrovert, but really there's a fine line between extroverts and introverts. An introvert can be extroverted, but they use a lot of energy talking to people. And I mean, I'm having fun, but man, I go back to my hotel room or whatever, and I'm exhausted, because it takes so much out of you, but it's so fun talking about stuff that you believe in. I mean,
right.
it gives you energy. It's exciting, but to answer your question, yeah. So that'll probably be it. Unless somebody gives me a really good idea, then I might follow up on that too.
Perfect. Well, Alan, I appreciate you getting on with me today. Thank you so much. I learned a lot.
This was really fun. Thank you very much. And I look forward to talking with you again.
Thank you for listening to the Troy Podcast. Please subscribe, like, and share with your friends.